Thank you so much for brightening up our day. And that was a wonderful reception, of course, for our keynote speaker today. We're very excited and very honored to have the German Foreign Minister with us. Please join me in welcoming Annalena Baerbock. Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. What an audience here. I'm really delighted. Mr. Limburg, Maria Ressa, good to see you again. Ms. Nakamya. At the moment, there are no loud voices coming from Afghanistan. So we must raise our voices for them. We must be the voices for those who have no voice. These are the words of Ali Sayyad Malwale, an Afghan journalist who left his country after the Taliban took power in 2021. Today, he lives in Pakistan. He was able to continue reporting in exile with the support of the Deutsche Welle program, Space for Freedom. To me, his story highlights two things. It shows the enormous power of journalism, of all of you present here today, the ability to tell stories that would otherwise go unnoticed, to ask questions that would otherwise go unanswered, to hold accountable those whose power would otherwise be unchecked, and to be the voice of those who cannot be allowed to be heard at the moment, like many people in Afghanistan. But this man's story also shows that independent journalism is under pressure worldwide. According to Reporters Without Borders, press freedom has declined in almost every region of the world. One reason for this is that journalists are too often becoming targets in wars and conflicts. In 2023, an estimated 120 journalists were killed while doing their job, almost 2/3 of them in Gaza alone. That is unacceptable. We are also seeing autocratic regimes across the world increasingly cracking down on independent media. And their tools have become more varied, digitalized, meaning that they are not always easy to detect. Maria Ressa, who will be speaking shortly about her own experience, and we met in her home country, who told me there how the regime of Rodrigo Duterte spread lies about her and her family on social media, how she received 90 hate messages online every day, how she was subjected to sham lawsuits and arrests against her. She once described these messes as, I quote, "death by 1,000 cuts for our democracies." That is precisely why these instruments are so dangerous, because their effects are insidious, often unnoticed in the beginning, coming from many sides at once and not in one big blow. And I just heard from Mr. Limburg while we were walking here that just recently in Ethiopia, a human rights person was also hit by that. So it happens every day, everywhere on our planet. We as societies have to stand up against these threats. Let's not forget, where press freedom is under pressure, freedom itself is in danger for all citizens. That is why Germany is so committed to media freedom. But obviously, the crucial question is, what can we do to strengthen these independent voices? To me, there are two main areas for action. First, we must protect the physical spaces in which journalists can do their work. People like the journalist from Afghanistan, or people like the 29-year-old Anam al-Noor from Darfur. As a journalist, she reported on the Sudanese civil war, on rape and targeted executions, on a refugee shelter that was burned down by militias, leaving dozens of children with nowhere to go, with nobody at their side. Eventually, when her own family came under fire, Anam al-Noor had to decide to flee as well. Today, she lives in Uganda and produces radio features on the situation in Darfur for those who are still there. She is being supported by the Hannah Arendt Initiative, the protection program for journalists of the German government, in which we cooperate with partners from civil society, such as Deutsche Welle, Akademie, and the Spaces of Freedom program. We have already supported 5,000 journalists in this way, quite literally giving them a space to work. And I was honored to just meet a couple of them coming from Russia, from Belarus, and also from Ukraine, and one journalist from Ukraine who used to live in the east in Donetsk. She told me, when you are now cheering the European Football Championship, I remember that I was a speaker in the stadium of Donetsk for UEFA, but then I had to flee. And she also reported about the ability that having a connection with Deutsche Welle and with the reporting backwards also means sometimes this wonderful moments, what she just told us when we spoke together, that it's the only way to see that some of the school friends are alive when they leave a little message under her reports. So it's not only about freedom of media, it's not only about strengthening our independent voices in our democracy, but it's about not forgetting about the people back home. This is why we initiated the Hannah Arendt Initiative, and this is why I'm so thankful for all of your work here at Deutsche Welle, because together you can show that we are stronger together, because journalists can continue to raise their voices, and thereby the voices of the people in their home countries. That brings me to my second point. We have to make sure that technology does not distort the digital spaces for independent journalistic voices. 2 weeks ago, we witnessed the culmination of the world's biggest elections taking place in India. We saw an impressive electoral process with almost 1 billion people called upon to vote. And we saw why some called this the first AI election in history. During the election campaign, candidates gave speeches that were simultaneously translated into 14 languages by an AI app. AI generated voices, called voters on the phone to promote policies and candidates. AI certainly brings great opportunities to elevate people's voices. But in India, we also saw hundreds of deepfake videos emerge during the election campaign. Fake speeches by politicians, fake messages from Bollywood stars. And I believe if we look at our elections, this is just a taste of what is to come. AI makes disinformation campaigns cheaper, easier, and more effective. Campaigns that, on the other hand, undermine or are capable of undermining trust in democratic institutions, but also in independent journalists, like what we hear from Maria Ressa later. That is why, again, we have to think how we handle this situation. Like back in time with internet, it has such a big positive dimension and it won't go away, but we have to be prepared for the negative side. This is why we are pushing for an international regulation on AI. We want to be able to harness the great potential of AI, but at the same, we want to make sure that it is used fairly and ethically. Take the AI Convention that we adopted at the Council of Europe last month, or the AI Act on the European Union that the Council of the EU just approved. Those are concrete steps to ensure that basic rights, freedom of expression, and protection from discrimination also apply to AI. Because we need to shape this technology in a way that keeps human beings in control, that benefits all our societies. We know that this will be a task for an entire generation, not only of journalists, not only of politicians, but of whole societies. But if we don't start addressing this task now, we will risk falling behind. And let me be clear, we should not make the same mistake twice. When the big social media platforms emerged in the 1990s, we did not realize the challenges that this groundbreakingly new way of interaction would entail. Today, we have learned that we cannot leave it to a handful of CEOs and algorithms to shape the rules on how millions of people communicate. That is why the EU enacted the Digital Services Act, which obliges large tech companies with more than 45 million users to delete false information more quickly. These solutions are important to make sure that independent voices are not silenced, that our platforms are not flooded with fake news, that journalists can do their job. And they are part of an even bigger question. How do we make our societies more resilient? Not just against the challenges of technology, but also against the rise in hatred and propaganda that we are all so exposed to. You, as journalists, we, as politicians, and all of us as members of open societies. I'm glad that we are about to discuss these issues in a minute. One thing is clear. Independent journalism is a cornerstone of our democratic systems. And this is why I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of you, not only as journalists, but as people, for holding those in power accountable, for telling the stories that would otherwise go unnoticed, for giving a voice to those who would otherwise go unheard, and by that, for making our democracies more resilient. Thank you.